Hi, and welcome to Why Wait? Driving Gender Balance and New Opportunities for Women Today. My name is Bobbie Carlton, and I'm the founder of Innovation Women. We're an online visibility bureau. I'm here because Innovation Women's mission is to get more women on stage at conferences and events, especially those tech and industry conferences, which are so often male and pale. We recognize that these less than diverse conferences hurt everyone, not just women. So just a little bit of housekeeping right up front. This webinar is being recorded and it will be available soon, so you can share the link with your friends. Sharing is caring. So here's an agenda of what we'll be covering today. The gender gap, why we need to change the situation, the symptoms and the opportunity, including an introduction to what we call the speaker's paradise, why we need to change the situation, how we can go about changing it, why we can't wait for the ratio to change, and what we're going to do about it. I'll also be glad to take any questions at the end. You can add a question at any time during this presentation. So when I start working on a plan for anything, I usually start with a situation analysis. Here's our situation, ladies. Like a lot of things, it comes down to the money. Last year, the World Economic Forum, best known for the annual Davos gatherings, issued its latest Global Gender Gap Report. The report added 47 years to the time necessary to reach workplace equality. According to the WEF, in 2017, gender parity shifted into reverse, and it'll now take only 217 years to end the disparities in the pay and employment opportunities of men and women. It's the first time since 2006 that our slow but steady progress toward parity has halted. The Global Gender Gap Report benchmarks 144 countries on their progress toward gender parity across 4 thematic dimensions. There's economic participation and opportunity, educational attainment, health and survival, and political empowerment. The Global Gender Gap Index reveals that all countries can do more to close the gender gap. Across the index, there are only 5 countries that have closed 80% of the gap or more: Iceland, Norway, Finland, Rwanda, and Sweden. In addition, there are 64 countries that have closed between 70 and 80% of their gender gap. And an additional 65 countries have closed between 60 and 70%, while 10 countries have closed between 50 and 60%. In 2016, no country had closed less than 50% of their overall gender gap. And out of the 142 countries covered by the index both this year and last year, 82 countries have increased their overall gender gap score compared to last year, while 60 have seen it decrease. The big debate in this space isn't whether a gender gap or gender wage gap exists, it's why the gap exists. Some think the wage gap is the result of gender discrimination, an economy that doesn't believe women can perform as well as men. Others point to women selecting into certain fields that pay less, while still others cite the gaps in the types of education men and women pursue. An economist at Princeton University makes a compelling case for another explanation. The gender wage gap is mostly a penalty for us bearing children. So you can see right here what happens when you have your first child. Men who have children don't see the same impact. And in case you want to compare those two slides and the difference side by side, it's really easy to see what the difference is. As reporting requirements have opened up the ledgers of many organizations, we're discovering new inequalities. Here's one example. Bonuses for female investment bankers at Barclays. They're 78.7% smaller on average compared to those paid to male bankers. In total, what women are receiving is around half of that of men at the bank's international division, which houses the investment bank at Barclays. In April 2018, Barclays was the first major UK bank to make a gender pay gap disclosure under the new rules there. They require any organization with 250 or more employees to publish their data. Outside the investment banking division, Barclays pays women on average 26% less than men and hands out bonuses to women that are 60% lower than those received by men. Always more men than women in the higher paid positions and more women than men in the lower paid positions. And while you would think that things might be getting better and that existing inequities are a remnant of the bad old days, things are continuing to go in the wrong direction. Women between ages 25 and 34 are slipping when it comes to pay equality with men. And that's according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. In 2016, in that age group, the so-called millennials, women made just under 89 cents on a man's dollar, down from a high of 92 cents in 2011. That means that the gender gap in median weekly earnings was the widest in 7 years. In Massachusetts, where we're located, we're looking at positions of power and influence. So, for example, the 5 out of the 9 Massachusetts State University presidents were women in 2001, and today there's 0. So who controls the money? And ladies, if you're watching the news, it may feel like women are having a moment, but there are a number of places where we're backsliding. Here's another example. Progress was being made, and now we're going in the wrong direction again. Venture capital and funding is only one area where women are being left behind. In the last few years, women lost ground as well when it comes to the venture dollars. Male-run companies are experiencing a reverse trend. They saw fewer deals last year, but larger average investments. In 2016, it was $10.9 million on average. In 2015, 9.7, and in 2014, 8.4. Take a look at this slide. Can you see those tiny little pink nubs there? Those are the deals with women founders. So aside from the fairness of it all, why do we care? Diversity leads to creativity, which is even more necessary in a world undergoing an industrial revolution. Diverse teams perform better. For example, companies perform better when they have at least one woman on their board. Women-led companies perform 3 times better than the S&P 500. Quantopian, a Boston-based trading platform based on crowdsourced algorithms, pitted the performance of Fortune 1000 companies that had women CEOs between 2002 and 2014 against the S&P 500's performance during that same period. The comparison showed that the 80 women CEOs during those 12 years produced equity returns 226% better than the S&P 500. So what happens if we don't diversify? What if we don't gender balance? In today's world, you could be reaping PR and social media scorn. Maybe you don't care what others think about you. Well, hiring gets harder, and in a tight job market like we have today, you're going to care. Or are you? Automation is coming. Maybe you don't think you need all those employees. A predicted 1.4 million U.S. jobs are going to be at risk from technology, automation, and other factors between now and 2026. More than half, 57% of those jobs currently performed by women. While a huge amount of emphasis has been put on the manufacturing jobs, the World Economic Forum says that this has skewed the view of automation from a gender perspective. The narrative tends to focus on male, blue-collar, factory workers, for example, but there are also a large number of female-dominated roles, like secretaries and administrative assistants, that are facing displacement. Nearly 164,000 female secretaries are at risk, according to the report, compared with 90,000 at-risk male assembly line workers. And let's think about your last grocery shopping trip. What happens to the mostly female workforce when all the lines are self-checkout? So why do we care? Because there are real tangible benefits to us all. We can increase the global GDP by $5.3 trillion by 2025 just by closing the gender gap in economic participation by 25% over the same period. So, my point on this has always been women need to say yes to speaking invitations. This leads us to 2018 and our central thesis. We know the status of pay equity and equality, so we started Innovation Women as a way to address them both. Bear with me, there is a connection here. Just last week, Bizzabo released a study detailing the reality of the events world. It's not really getting any better. Around 70% of the speakers at conferences and events are men, and 30% are women. 2018 was the year of bio. In addition to an event featuring 27 all-male panels, the big unofficial party at bio, not associated with bio or PABNAB, featured a wide variety of sexist entertainment. 2018 was also the year of CES. This is a quote from Karen Chupka, the Senior Vice President at CES, and she's talking about that limited pool of women when it comes to those really incredibly high-profile positions. This is how they're choosing their speakers. 2018 was also the year of J.P. Morgan. Men represented 94% of the 540 people presenting high-profile corporate updates at J.P. Morgan's conference this year. In addition, men represent 77% of the speakers for J.P. Morgan's special sessions, and that's a slate of talks that included 9 panel events, 4 of which were all-male panels with no women moderators or panelists at all. The speaker lineups were slightly more diverse at several of the conferences surrounding the main JPM event, but those two skewed heavily male. 67% of the speakers at the biotech showcase were male, and 75% of speakers at the Startup Health Festival were male. One newspaper article made the point that men named Michael outnumbered the female CEOs represented at the conference. Here's a little chart, puts it very graphically, what happens when you've got all these speakers and how many of them are men and how many of them are women. The organizers actually said they were not responsible for the dearth of women among the company presenters, and that's because the company presenters have the ability to choose who they send. And obviously, they usually send their CEOs. They do choose the high-profile speakers who give the opening remarks, who talk on the panels, participate in the fireside chats, and deliver the keynote speeches. Oh, we're experiencing a delay.
There's going to be spinning, but she said don't click. It's going to come.
Okay.
But it's going to be delayed.
Hold on just 1 second, folks. Looks like there's a delay on the platform. So, actually, I wonder if we can take questions from the audience during this time period. So, if you have any questions, now's a good time to break into that while we're in the middle of the presentation. This is amusing because this is actually our second attempt at doing this presentation. The first time we actually couldn't get on board, so this time we're getting into it at least halfway. Great. So actually, I'm just going to move on. So you got slides there, and the slides may catch up with me. We'll see. When we're talking about speaking engagements, we're really caught in this catch-22 situation. And I think the J.P. Morgan stuff really aptly demonstrates that. Without enough women in place in these various tech companies, we're never going to appear in equal numbers on stage when it's a senior management person who's going to be representing the company. We'll never appear in equal numbers on stage. We'll never appear in senior management or in the boardroom. And yet, those are the very things that can help us grow the number of women on stage in senior management or in the boardroom. It's that classic catch-22. A lot of the conferences and events, they acknowledge the fact that there's a lack of leadership that makes women qualified to be gracing their stage. They know there's a lack of women in cybersecurity. They know there's a lack of women in the senior roles at a lot of these companies. And it's part of the larger lack of diversity in the tech space as a whole. So one of the things that we talk about a lot is all of the excuses that event managers use when they're talking about getting women on stage. There's actually even a bingo card with excuses from event managers, and I'm sure we've heard them all. No women volunteered. There aren't really many women in this field. We need big-name speakers to sell tickets. We invited 2 women, and they said no. And speaking of which, RSA, who publicly got dinged for their lack of women on stage, they stated publicly that they invited many women to speak and were turned down, or some of those invitations were still pending. Which brings us back again to that thesis that we're using, which is women need to say yes to public speaking. So let's talk about that opportunity. There's a huge opportunity for people who are willing to speak in public. There's a huge pull for speakers. There are great opportunities like TEDx. Meetup.com has hundreds of thousands of events. Eventbrite. When we talk about Meetup, most people don't realize that meetups are held 500,000 of them every single month. Eventbrite sold tickets to 2 million events last year. And there are 50,000 individual TEDx events and conferences that have happened. Hundreds of thousands of events means hundreds of thousands of speaking opportunities. And many of these opportunities are ongoing programs which look for a new panel of speakers for every single event. And there are big benefits to being a speaker. Every time you can tell your story in front of an audience, you're speaking to potential customers, or the audience is a conduit to potential customers. Let's take a meetup that we know about in the Boston area, the Boston Big Data Meetup as an example. It has more than 4,000 members. The monthly events draw anywhere from 300 to 500 attendees, and that's 300 to 500 people who are all interested in big data. If you're selling to a big data crowd, that sounds like a golden opportunity to me. Last year, I was on a conference at the Colorado University in Boulder. It was the Conference on World Affairs, and I was on a panel with 3 other women. And a student asked us, what's the best thing that you can do for your career? Across the board, before they even got to me, the answer was get comfortable with public speaking. Being able to clearly present concepts and your point of view is hugely valuable. You also get featured in the marketing materials for the event and in the social media around the event. Just being able to stand up and present at small internal meetings, these are things that mark you for promotion. Getting out there and speaking gets you considered for new jobs. So, bonus benefit, I can hear you saying now I'm not Warren Buffett, but Warren Buffett is one of those people out there advocating for public speaking. So side benefit is maybe you get paid to speak too. Entrepreneurs learn very quickly that visible startups and visible C-suite teams get more funding. Female entrepreneurs receive such a tiny fraction of the venture funding in this country. 85% of the venture capital goes to companies with no women on the senior management team at all. While pitch contests and the like, Shark Tank can lead to funding, just being a regular on the pitching circuit and the speaking circuit can play an important role in getting you in front of the right people, those people with money. And the more they hear your story, the more likely they are to get funded. So I'm going to stop right there. Hopefully we'll see those slides catch up. We've got a whole bunch of questions here. So one person says, I worry that having to make the case why women are important feels like pleading, not coming from a position of strength. Men certainly don't have to make the case while men are important. Any ideas about language when presenting this information? Oh, Lynn. Lynn asked that question, and I totally agree with that, Lynn. I've heard a lot of conversation about why we have to keep making this case. And I hate to say it, but it comes down to a lot of having to make the case because we get people that are still pushing back. I was talking to an event manager recently who was talking about how it made her job, and this is a her, mind you, so much more difficult because she had to chase down more women and ask more women to balance the speaking slots at her conference. So one of the stats that we've gotten from many of the event managers is women say no 50% of the time, and men say yes 90% of the time. So we're still in convincing mode. We're still in a place where we have to present the evidence. I'm going to come back to the language around that a little bit later because I do have some ideas, and we can also send out some messaging after this. The next question is, I run a tech and executive recruiting agency, and I'm worried about the lack of response to my attempts to reach out to STEM women for great opportunities in the U.S. In my opinion, women need to learn to help each other to reach great opportunities, not compete. I would like to reach female hiring managers to help build a strong chain of collaboration to help women. there is a great hashtag out there called Women Helping Women. And I think you're right. There are women who don't respond to all these great opportunities, and there are reasons for that. We know the reasons why women say no to speaking opportunities. Number one, women are more likely to work part-time. They're more likely to work for smaller companies. Both of those mean that it's harder to get out of the office to go to an all-day conference or an event. It's hard to leave the office when you're only in the office 2 days a week. It's hard to leave the office when there's no backup. We also are still in a situation where women are more likely still to be responsible for home and family. You know, it's very hard to be the breakfast keynote if you have to drop somebody off at school at 8 a.m. So totally agree with you there. Are you working with CES on this year's conference? Also, I have a lead for JP Morgan's Women Initiative. Awesome. Actually, CES has this year announced that they're doing a much better job with their gender equity. I can point directly to our friends at Gender Avenger on that one. So Gender Avenger is an organization that points out all-male panels and issues of inequity. I highly recommend their app, which allows you to not only count up and create a social media-ready image that you can then tweet out, but it also allows you to track the amount of time that male and female speakers are speaking on stage. Which events do you think are the least represented in terms of women speakers on a regular basis? I have to admit, I actually went to one event where there were so few women, not only on stage, but in the audience, that when I went into the ladies' room, the lights went on. So those motion sensors were not busy that day, is what I can say about that. We tend to see fewer women in a lot of different industries. One of the most searched terms on our website is cybersecurity, and we've been working with a number of organizations that are very actively addressing the lack of women on stage in security and cybersecurity. I went to an industrial IoT event, which also had very few women and was making a very active pitch for getting more women speakers. But I think we really need to look back at the manufacturing industry, and there are very few women in a lot of those types of industries. But overall, we just talked, we talked last night with a woman who is the sole female speaker at a finance conference. And when you have criteria for an event, for example, unicorns or Fortune 500 companies, you're going to have a very limited pool to draw from if you're just looking at the CEOs. So one of the things that we talk with event managers about is changing their criteria if they realize that their criteria is going to be creating a problem for them. I love your content and think it would be fantastic if you can share the slides. Absolutely, we can share the slides. It says, I love your content and think it would be fantastic if you can share the slides with the Innovation Women members, speakers, so we can share the same story and give you attribution credit for the slides. Would you be open to that? Yes, I will put the slides up on SlideShare, especially since it doesn't look like they are going to be shared on this platform today. And the hashtag is great. I'll start using it. Awesome. It's a good hashtag. All right, so very valuable information. Okay, I think we've gone through the questions there. We're going to jump back into what we were talking about here. Still no slides, so I'm just going to keep on rolling. So we are getting back into the conversation about entrepreneurs and getting funding. So the more likely someone is to hear your story, the more likely you are to get funding. So what we want you to do is get out there, get speaking, and make more connections. Expand your community. extend your circle, and be networking through your speaking engagements. Think about it this way. If there are 100 people in the room with you, thousands of people probably received the email blasts promoting the event. Thousands more probably saw an ad, a tweet, a LinkedIn or Facebook post. Then, what if the organization posts a video or turns your presentation into a podcast? We can add that into the potential audience. When you speak, it's not uncommon to have someone in the audience share your great wisdom with their network via social media, or just tell someone about it. When you are doing public speaking, you are also adding to your storehouse of credibility. So, why are we concerned about this now? Because we've got some momentum. And I'm going to have to resort to the mathematical equation for momentum. Momentum equals mass times velocity. An object must be moving in order to have momentum. A body in motion tends to stay in motion, and a body at rest tends to stay at rest. That's inertia, remember in physics class. We need to break free and get moving in order to affect change. So we've got momentum right now. For example, Time's Up is a movement against sexual harassment and was founded earlier this year by Hollywood celebrities in response to the Weinstein effect and Me Too. Mark Wahlberg and the William Morris Endeavor, his talent agency, donated more than $2 million to Time's Up in early January. This occurred after it was revealed that Michelle Williams, who was Mark Wahlberg's co-star in the movie All the Money in the World, received only $800 for 10 days' work to redo certain scenes in the movie, while he received $1.5 million for the same 10 days of work. Meanwhile, another momentum example, Time magazine in 2018 named the Silence Breakers its Person of the Year. And it's not just about gender equity, pay equity, and gender bias. Other social issues are also seeing movement right now. After years of little to no progress on the gun control issue, it feels like an iceberg has shifted there. And last year's Oscar So White feels like there's hope for more diversity in Hollywood, especially coming from the fictional African country of Wakanda. Black Panther was a huge box office smash, and the Oscars are definitely looking a little more colorful. Jordan Peele made history as the first African American to win for Best Original Screenplay for Get Out. We also have things like Walmart, Kroger's, and Dick's Sporting Goods have been working on the gun control issue to control underage sales, and dozens of companies have cut economic ties with the NRA, so they're no longer offering discounts to their members. These are all great social issues that are seeing movement and momentum right now. So as women, we need to take advantage of the momentum that's being offered to us. At Innovation Women, we chose speaking engagements as our path to gender equity. We know that visibility breeds success, and the question is, can we make conferences and events move fast enough to take advantage of that? Many organizations look to move their events forward incrementally in terms of gender equity. If last year's event had 20% women on stage, maybe this year we'll target 25%. We worked with Thai Startup Con, and we proved that you can move a lot faster by moving them from 23% women on stage to 50% in just 1 year. So, how did they do it? Number one, a diversity goal was incorporated into the event's vision, and it was reviewed frequently, especially during those early planning phases. Attract diverse and serious rising entrepreneurs that Thai Boston can serve through its other programs was part of the diversity goal. One way to attract diverse attendees is to demonstrate that commitment to inclusivity in the speaker lineup. The addition of outside the organization conference and track chairs helped expand the network and the opportunities to diversify the conference. So last year I was invited to be one of the conference chairs, which brought the Innovation Women Network into play. We had 9 Innovation Women speakers scheduled to be at the event. Marketing partnerships with a variety of organizations also helped expand the source of speakers and presenters. And each week, an organizing committee of conference chairs, track leads, and session producers reviewed panels, topics, and speakers. And every single meeting, we were questioning the diversity and gender balance. Our speaker asks were made mostly sequentially to help us maintain the diversity and the balance. And today we hear of many organizations setting long-term goals for diversity and inclusion. Thai Startup Con's experience seems to be proof that change can come about very swiftly if we focus on it. So, to conclude, visibility equals opportunity. Every time you get on stage, you get the gift of an opportunity. And as a community, we need to look at how we're providing these paths to visibility and influence. Thank you. So this presentation is kicking off the Innovation Women Speak webinar series. So our next different webinar will be 3 secrets to being a viral leader. How to launch, lead, and grow your organization. We'll be featuring Innovation Women member Jen Koken, and the date for that will be January 9th, 2019. Another lunch and learn right here at noon Eastern Time. And Jen is a life coach of 20 years who helps CEOs and entrepreneurs overcome their self-made limitations to reach new levels in their personal and business lives. Her first book, and by the way, love this title, Jen, When I Die, Take My Panties, Turning Your Darkest Moments into Your Greatest Gifts, and it chronicles the experience of coping with her mother's death from ovarian cancer and shares Jen's core message that everything that comes our way is meant to teach us something about ourselves. When she's not crafting best-selling books or speaking to audiences across the country, you can find her performing stand-up comedy or eating Nutella by the spoonful in the nearest grocery aisle. So, again, you can join us on January 9th. Obviously, we will try again to get this particular conference up on Bright Talk. So if you want to see those slides, we will be posting them as well, and we'll send out links to this. So I think we answered the questions that people had placed earlier during the conference, and we will all talk to you soon. Thanks for joining us.